We live in this great democratic country, and unlike many places around the world, we have the privilege of voting in elections. And from an Israel advocacy perspective, whilst we may have reservations about the incoming government, we at least know that they can be voted out in 3 years' time. Australia has just been through one of the most superficial election campaigns ever. No robust political debate, only slogans and the avoidance of detailed discussion on many issues, including the Middle East. This, of course, was facilitated by the mainstream media, who attacked the coalition relentlessly and disregarded any of the government's achievements, and also refused to critically examine Labor's leaders or the shallowness of their policies. The electorate responded to Climate 200 candidates and accepted their invitation to worship at the altar of climate change. And although those in our electorates profess to be fair on Israel, it doesn't take much imagination to see that between Labor, the Greens, and those climate independents with records of anti-Israel activism, Israel will have fewer real friends in Parliament. So, don't be surprised when Labor recognises a Palestinian state, which Penny Wong said was one of the first things it will do when it wins government. In itself, this is a meaningless gesture, as there is no such thing in existence or likely to exist in the near future. It is also unclear which corrupt terror organisation the ALP plans to recognise. But it is a slap in the face for Israel and signals that the Australian government has officially bought into the fake narrative and diplomatic war that the Palestinian Arabs have been waging for the last 50 years. Don't be surprised when the Palestinian Nakba becomes recognised as a major historical event and Israel's creation is increasingly referred to as a colonial enterprise that needs to be corrected. Don't be surprised when more anti-Israel motions are put to the Australian Parliament as Labor reveals its true colours on Israel, with the Greens and some independents being empowered to join the circus. Don't be surprised when anti-Semitism increases, as firstly the neo-Nazis and extreme left take their lead from government hostility to Israel, and then when the government looks the other way on Islamic anti-Semitism as a reward for the Muslim vote. Don't be surprised when the BDS movement gains more traction, as the government attempts to justify that it does have some merits. Remember, Albanese condemned the BDS movement in general, but couldn't bring himself to make any direct comment on the Sydney festival fiasco. And don't be surprised when Australia votes more often against Israel at the United Nations, which will be far worse than the previous government simply abstaining some of the time. Our communal organisations will be delirious over the Labor win, as for them, it means that the two-state solution remains the holy grail for solving the issues of the Middle East, irrespective that it has been a dismal failure for 100 years. As the saying goes, madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Yes, it is going to be a challenging 3 years for Israel advocacy in this country, and I suspect that the AJA will need to do even more work in calling out bad behaviour by the government, the leftist media and Jewish far left, all of whom want to see Israel cut down to size. We are going to need your support more than ever. This is Alan Friedman for the Australian Jewish Association.